Guys, BG in the house. It's Friday evening. Let's just check that this is going out live. Looks like it is. I can see a few of the usual faces in the chat. So good evening to everyone who's joined already. And this is the third edition of Ask BG Anything. Haven't actually done this now for about 3 months or so. We've done 2 before, and they both proved relatively popular. So, yeah, hopefully you guys will enjoy it. Hopefully a few of you will check it out. Before I get started, bit of housekeeping. Give me a follow on Twitter at Boxing Gossip. I put it out on Twitter that I was going to be doing this video a few days ago and got a load of questions sent in. So first and foremost, I'm going to be referring to my mobile phone a lot in this video so that I can read out questions that I've screenshotted from earlier. Second bit of housekeeping. Podcast went up on Wednesday. Really enjoyed filming this week's podcast, and I always do, but this week in particular had some real good debate as to the pound for pound list and all-time great heavyweight. So if you like that sort of stuff, do check it out. I hope you'll enjoy it. I said I was going to try and crack open a drink to sip alongside this podcast, and I think I've made a bit of an error. So I purchased 3 of these. And I don't think I'll be drinking all 3. Henry Weston's 2016 vintage cider. Not normally a cider drinker, but you know, it's kind of hotter weather where I am here, and I thought I'd have one. So my first mistake was when I poured it out, I looked at the back of the bottle, 8.2%. Now, I don't know about you guys, there's probably far manlier men than I am in the chat here, but 8.2% is going to be difficult for me to get down. Certainly won't be able to do 3 of them. I'll be out of action for a week, but we'll give it a go. I've poured it into a glass. Maybe not the most visually appealing cider you've ever seen. Not the greatest head. Let's be honest. Yeah, I mean, there's a few things you could describe it as looking like, but we'll give it a go. I'll use it to quench my first between questions. Maybe I'll even review the cider as we go through it. So yeah, once again, shout out to everyone who's joined. I can see there's over 30 of you guys already. So if you are watching live, please hit the thumbs up button. That will mean this gets a bit more visibility and mean a few more people join as we're broadcasting live. So I would appreciate that. Right, let's get into the questions. And if you're in the chat, I'm going to give preference at the beginning to questions that have been sent in to me in advance. So if you want to do that in future, hit me up on Facebook and Twitter. The links are in the description below, and then we'll come to the chat afterwards. So we'll get started. First question I've got is from Stefan. So shout out to Stefan. He often gives me a retweet on Twitter, so appreciate that. Who do you consider the most underrated and overrated boxer in the UK? And then the same question, but the world. Good question. Underrated and overrated boxers in the UK. Let's start with underrated. And I'll throw a few names out there. Lee Selby. You know, I think Lee Selby is one of the best Britain has. But I think if you ask people, I don't think they would go for Lee Selby. I think Billy Joe Saunders is potentially very underrated. Bradley Skeet, I think, is a very underrated fighter. So those 3. Who is the most underrated? I'm going to say Lee Selby. You know, I think Lee Selby is potentially a super elite fighter, and I don't think he gets that perception. Overrated boxers in Britain. Well, it's got, for me, the most overrated boxer in Britain is probably Martin Murray, and you know, trying not to single him out, but then again, I have to answer the question. If you look back at Martin Murray's resume, who are the best 3 people that Martin Murray has actually beaten? You know, he's really fought at, every time he's fought at a decent level, he's lost, yet he's considered this sort of world-class type operator, certainly promoted in that sense. I think he is a you know, a very overrated fighter. You'd also have to mention Paul Smith. Again, who's the best person Paul Smith's ever beaten in his career? It's probably Tony Dodson. Same question, but world. Who is the most overrated fighter in the world? Overrated fighter in the world. Good question. You know, I'll give a bit of a shout out here to Keith Thurman. We did the podcast this week, as I said, and we discussed top pound for pound fighters in the world. And not one of the guys had, at least I don't think they did, not one of the guys had Keith Thurman in their list. Jet may have had Keith Thurman actually towards the bottom. But my point is, Keith Thurman has got some, you know, and I was a Keith Thurman skeptic on the way up. But you know, he's beaten guys like Sean Porter. He's beaten guys like Danny Garcia. He's the only guy to beat Danny Garcia. I think he deserves a lot more credit. You know, for me, he's probably the #1 welterweight at 100, you know, in the division. And I think he deserves more credit for that. If we look at other underrated fighters, again, Alexander Usyk, I think he's, for me, beating the #2 heavyweight at the time in Glowacki. I think he deserves possibly a bit more credit than he gets. Andre Ward, you know, people, you know, I don't want to revisit the podcast. In terms of overrated fighters on a global rating, maybe Adrian Broner is one of them. You know, I'm someone who's been buying into the Adrian Broner hype for years, but maybe it's time to accept that perhaps he is simply just an overrated fighter. Yes, he's another one I'd throw into the mix. Overrated. Let's have a think. Yeah, the name escapes me, but there's a few. So hopefully that answers your question, Stefan. And thanks for asking it. Let's have a look. Whipboy, again, a regular person on my Twitter, so shout out to him. BG, what do you think the best possible result in the Mayweather-McGregor fight to appease the non-believers? I should have actually tweeted you back for clarification on what that question means. Who are the non-believers? So is that people who are MMA fans who don't believe boxers are any good? Or, you know, I think the best result is if it goes a few rounds and there isn't a knockout against a run of play. Look, if Conor McGregor comes out, outboxes Floyd for 3 or 4 rounds and then knocks him out, fair play to him. If Floyd, you know, comes out and outboxes, schools Conor for 3 or 4 rounds, then stops him, again, fair play to him. If there's a first round knockout or something like that, then it's going to create some skepticism about, you know, who the better man actually is. And, you know, someone's going to say it was a lucky punch, that sort of thing, etc. So the best man will win on the night. I suspect it's Floyd. Most people watching will suspect it's Floyd. But there you go. Lewis has tweeted me, is there any heavyweight now or in a few years who you would give a good chance of beating Anthony Joshua? Good question. And the answer to that is yes. A good chance of beating Anthony Joshua is quite vague. I mean, I would say a good chance is 30% or higher. Is there anyone I'd necessarily pick to beat Anthony Joshua right now? Probably not. I think Joshua is the #1 heavyweight in the division. But is there anyone I'd give a good chance? I'd give Hughie Fury a 30% chance, certainly. I'd give Deontay Wilder a 30% chance, certainly. Let's have a think. Who else? Hughie Fury and Wilder, I'd give a good chance. Those are the 2 most notable names. If Tyson Fury was in the condition he was in when he fought Vladimir Klitschko, I'd make him a favourite over Joshua. But you guys know we're unlikely to ever see that Tyson Fury again, so I won't waste too much breath talking about it. Look, Joshua, for me, he's beaten the man. Joshua is the #1 heavyweight in the world. Joshua has just beaten the #1 heavyweight in the world prior to him, as far as I'm concerned. So, you know, I think Joshua deserves to start favourite over anyone in the division right now. He's shown weaknesses in his fights. All fighters do. He's shown vulnerabilities against Dillian Whyte and against Vladimir Klitschko. But it's going to take quite something to beat him. So, yeah, let's see. Kieran, What 8 heavyweights would you like to see in a Super 8 tournament? Good question. Well, you'd start with the champions. So you'd definitely have Joshua, you'd have Wilder, and you'd have Joseph Parker. I personally would like to see Hughie Fury in there. I would have Jarrell Miller in there. Definitely. I'd have Jarrell Miller in there. Very exciting heavyweight. You'd have Luis Ortiz in there. Certainly. So that's 6. Maybe you'd consider throwing in a Dillian Whyte. Maybe. And then you take one of the other top-ranked guys, a Stiverne, a Jennings, a Pulev. You know, maybe not the most exciting choices. And I think you'd kind of gear it up so that Joshua and Wilder could potentially meet in the final. So maybe you'd seed it that way if you like. I'd like to see Wilder, Jarrell Miller. I'd like to see Joshua, Hughie Fury. Those would be sort of good openers for me, if you like. Right, let's try some of this Henry Weston's cider. Ask BG Anything number 3, brought to you by the cider tonight. So, I don't know if anyone's had this before. Let's give it a go. You know what? It's not bad. It's quite dry. It's quite sweet. Possibly a bit sweeter than I'd like. It's kind of got like a sort of heavy petrol type vibe to it, which I guess is why you're getting an 8.2%. You know, I guess it comes when you're drinking cider that strong. It does say it's suitable for vegetarians, vegan, and celiacs. So I know we get a lot of vegans tuning into the channel. So, so up to you. Right. Let's have a look at what question is next. Joey. Shout out to Joey. Who wins if Josh Taylor fights? I'm going to have to actually Google this guy because I don't even know if I know him. Who wins if Josh Taylor fights Regis Projays, who's 20-0? US super lightweight with 17 KOs. Diaz Jr. I need to check this guy out. Poor research on my behalf, Joey. I haven't actually seen him so far. So I don't know is a poor answer to your question, but I will try and give the guy a look if I get the chance. Billy, do you think Billy Joe's move to the Ingle gym was the best thing for him? He seems in great shape. It looks good. You know, one thing I'd say about Billy Joe is I've noticed Billy Joe has become more and more heavy set in recent years. I've seen him a few times in person. I've seen him a lot on IFL TV. Billy Joe is always someone I've considered a small middleweight. In recent years, he's definitely put on the pounds a bit. Maybe it's part of growing old. Maybe it's the lifestyle. He's certainly he just looks like a broader, stronger guy. And he certainly looks in good shape now. He looks more muscular. He looks more ripped out. I just wonder if his style of fighting, you know, he's never going to be a power puncher. He's never going to be a mauler on the inside. I hope that strength that he's added won't deter from his style, you know, because for me, he's at his most effective when he's able to sort of be very slick, very moving, very mobile, throwing a jab. But I think the Ingles are probably the top trainers in the country. So anyone working with them is good. What I would say is I've sat next to that Dominic Ingle, or sat a row behind him at the Adam Etches fight that I went to recently. And, you know, he's an absolute beast. He's a huge guy. You know, he's a muscle guy. And I just wonder, you know, like I saw Kell Brook, we all saw Kell Brook put on a huge amount of muscle mass against Gennady Golovkin. And for me, that really negatively affected him. And it was disappointing because it was obvious it was going to negatively affect him. And then sure enough, it did. I don't want Billy Joe to go the same. Billy Joe is never going to be a huge punching, strong, mauling type guy. He needs to be light. He needs to be bouncy. He needs to be agile. So I don't want to see him get too heavy. But look, the Ingles are top trainers. The Ingles know how to deal with slick, slippery, southpaw type fighters. And, you know, Billy Joe, that should work for him. He needs some stability in his career now. He needs to be with a trainer. I actually did a video, and it was a good call for me. You know, I know self-praise is no praise, but I'm going to take it. I did a video when Saunders signed with Booth, saying I wasn't convinced it was a good move, saying Saunders really needs stability in his career. And Booth is the kind of guy where lots of fighters come and go from Adam Booth. You know, you notice this if you watch it. I don't know if Booth is quite an abrasive character, but lots of fighters, you know, start training with Adam Booth. He's good, but then they depart. And, you know, I did speculate that Billy Joe Saunders needed more stability. And hopefully Ingalls will provide that. Cos has put, what do you think of boxers rehydrating to crazy amounts? And is this unfair? A few examples, such as Canelo and Badu Jack. I've never, you know, it's within the rules of the sport. And for me, it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Yes, you can drain yourself down 20 pounds for a weigh-in and try and put that on in a day. And yes, that gives you the theoretical advantage of being much heavier for a fight. But for me, it also gives you a massive negative of being incredibly weight drained, incredibly dehydrated. And it's you know, it's kind of, you get one surface benefit in that you come into the ring heavier, but you get one huge negative. So if, you know, in terms of being drained and having to do that the day before the fight. So I don't really have, you know, I wouldn't want to stop it unless it's viewed as particularly unhealthy, but I know that boxers have to pass some sort of medical post-weigh-in. So as long as they get through that and it's, you know, the right people are making the right decisions, that it's fine and it's healthy to do so, then, you know, then fair enough. I think about boxers rehydrating, I don't think it's unfair. I think it's within the rules. And I think if you can make a weight class, then you can make a weight class. When it gets too much and, you know, it's too draining, then you move up to the next weight class. But I don't really have a problem with it, because I think whilst you are getting that positive, you're also getting the negative, as I mentioned. Tur has put, who do you think Bellew's next fight is going to be? It sounds like the David Haye fight is definitely gone. It also sounds like Joseph Parker's got a few other options, etc. I can't see the Dillian, Whyte, or the Wilder fights happening next. So I think the Ward fight is a realistic fight. You know, Andre Ward wants some big fights. He's talked about moving up in weight class. It's a winnable fight for from Ward's perspective and his opportunity to move up. From Bellew's perspective, yeah, obviously Ward outclasses him in terms of skill, but he's facing a much smaller man. So I would suspect Ward is the most likely, but you know, it's kind of hard to see it just now. I've always thought that Haye rematch would happen. I've always been deeply skeptical of the chat that Bellew wouldn't take that fight because of the money and the publicity associated with it. It would be such a massive fight. But if that's not going to happen, then Ward, I think, is a fair shout. Let's have a look, see who's next. Jordan, shout out to Jordan. Do you think the quality of competition a prospect faces should be decided based on the extent of their amateur experience? Yeah, certainly. I mean, there's no point putting people in with, you know, fights that they're not going to learn a lot for. So when Anthony Joshua turned over as pro, I think he started against Emanuele Leo, who was 7-0, and then quite quickly he was facing established journeymen, the likes of, you know, your Konstantin Eriches, your Dennis Bakhtovs. I imagine Joshua is fighting them 6 or 7 fights in, whereas you'd see other guys fighting them after 20 fights. So I think so. I think there are other factors, not just amateur experience, though. I think one of those factors would be age. So someone turns over quite late in their life. Look at David Haye's recent signings, Joyce, Michael Page. You know, these are not youngsters. These are not 21-year-olds who can mess around for 4 or 5 years, building their way through the ranks. I think you've also got to factor that in. But fundamentally, I think all fighters should take the same route. They should go through the levels. No matter how good your amateur experience is. Even Lomachenko lost when he stepped up to world title level that quickly. So I think there's still got to be more of a progression, and I think you still got to go up through the levels. it just depends how quickly you can do that. You know, Joshua needed 1 or 2 fights against the Dennis Baktovs of the world. Other fighters may need 10 fights to get to where they need to get. But I think you've still got to show yourself going through the levels, or else a Lomachenko type situation can happen. Look, the professional boxing game is very different to the amateur boxing game. And regardless of how good an amateur you are, if you're up against a wily pro with 50 fights under their belt, etc., you can get old man out of a fight. James, who are your top 5 pound-for-pound active UK fighters based on the eye test? Well, I don't believe you can have pound-for-pound based on the eye test. But if you're asking me which top 5 fighters look the best based on eye test, see, this is why I think it's an odd question, because is Daniel Dubois one of the best fighters based on eye test? Is Anthony Yarde one of the best fighters based on eye test? Very possibly. You know, they haven't faced much opposition, but they've absolutely run through it. They've left a trail of destruction behind them. So I think it's very hard to do pound for pound based on eye test. I really do. I think pound for pound needs to have a resume consideration in it. But if we're talking about which 5 fighters are most exciting based on the eye test, Joshua, Yarde, Josh Taylor, Eubanks, maybe Dubois. You know, those are very, very good fighters based on the eye test. Whitboy, I know we've had that question already. Jared, start out to Jared. I can see he's in the chat. Even. Stavern said a decision on the Wilder fight would be made soon. So if he steps aside, how do you see a fight between Wilder and Ortiz going? Good question. First and foremost, that fight will happen. If we look at Wilder's MO over his career, he's never thrown himself into the toughest fights. A guy like Luis Ortiz is an immense amount of risk for very little gain. Luis Ortiz, he's no youngster. He's getting older by the day. And his recent performances have been fairly suspect. You know, he looked very beatable against Dave Allen. He looked imperfect against Malik Scott. However, a guy like Deontay Wilder also has his imperfections, specifically defensively. And a guy like Luis Ortiz, with that amateur pedigree, with that southpaw stance, with that power, would have a very, very good chance against a guy like Deontay Wilder. If I'm honest, whilst it's a fight that could go both ways, at this point, I would put a slight lean to Deontay Wilder. And that would be a 55-45 type call for me. Why? I think Deontay Wilder would have a very substantial size advantage over Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz fought at the 200-pound division in the amateurs. That shouldn't be forgotten. He's a much smaller man than Wilder. I think he'd be susceptible to being caught by Wilder's long-range 1-2. I think Wilder would be far quicker and more athletic than Luis Ortiz. And I think Wilder could clip him, actually. I really do. If Luis Ortiz was able to get on the inside against Deontay Wilder, if he was able to duck under Wilder's jab and come into range and have more of a shootout against Deontay Wilder, if Luis Ortiz was able to find a home specifically to the body but also to the chin with his power punches, he probably wins the fight. But I think Luis Ortiz is slowing down. I think he's a smaller, older, less athletic guy. And I would give a slight edge to Deontay Wilder in what would be a very, very competitive fight. We're rattling through, guys. 85 of you watching live. If you are one of the 85, please hit the thumbs up. And we're going to go back in for another sip of the Henry Weston. As you can see, I'm making my way through this pint exceptionally slowly. Wow, that does blow your head off. It does. Let's continue. I'll be half cut by the end of this. Woody, evening. Tom, break down how you think the fight would go if Tyson Fury fought Wilder. I think that's a very, very hard question because it depends what type of Tyson Fury you factor in. If Tyson fought, Daniel's just put an excellent comment in the chat. Stick some ice in that Western's, Tom. I really missed a trick there, didn't I? Really, really missed a trick. But anyway, I won't disturb this now to go and find some ice in the freezer. So yeah, going back to Woody's question. If Tyson Fury fought Deontay Wilder now, Wilder would probably stop him in 2 or 3 rounds. If Tyson Fury, and I don't think Tyson Fury will ever return to his best. I think he's been too inactive for too long. I think he's got him too heavy. He's got too bad out of shape. He's not been living the life. I don't think we'll see, Tyson Fury as the same man as he once was. If he was that same guy, the guy who fought Vlad, I think Tyson Fury would beat Wilder very easily. I think Tyson Fury could literally fight the same fight he fought against Vladimir Klitschko against Deontay Wilder. I don't think Deontay Wilder would be able to have any more success than Vladimir Klitschko would. I suspect Deontay Wilder would be less tentative than Klitschko, but I also think he's got substantially worse technique than Klitschko. So I think he'd be swinging and missing. We know how inaccurate and how wild Deontay Wilder can be. So I think he'd be swinging and missing. And I think he'd be easy work for a counterpuncher like a Pete Tyson Fury. I don't think that fight goes any differently to how Fury Vlad went, except maybe there's a higher chance Wilder gets stopped because, as I say, he'd be more likely to throw caution to the wind and open up the gaps against a guy like Tyson Fury. Look at the success Errol Washington had against Deontay Wilder in their first couple of rounds. I think Tyson Fury would have that kind of success, but to a far bigger degree. Andrew, evening, Andrew. Thanks for the question. Joe Joyce allegedly will be ready for AJ and Wilder in 5 fights' time. Do you think he gets sparked cold by both? Firstly, it's irrelevant. No way is Joe Joyce going to get a fight with Joshua or Wilder in 5 fights. Even if he would be thrown in at that sort of level, there's no way those guys will fight him. I don't believe he's got that. I don't believe he's going to create. As I understand it, he's most likely going to be fighting on Dave. I don't think he's going to get the profile fighting on Dave to be a big enough draw that 5 fights in, he's going to be able to call out those sort of guys. For me, Joe Joyce is an interesting prospect. I'll look forward with great interest to see how he gets on in the pros. I was one of the few who wasn't convinced he actually won that Olympic medal. I was inclined to think the silver medal for Joyce was actually a fair result. And I know most people disagree with me on that. But I thought Tony Yoka really showed boxing dominance over Joe Joyce. And I thought Tony Yoka's movement and long-range work actually was the difference in that fight. So I want to see how he deals with a moving fighter. Based on that, a guy like a Hughie Fury or Brian Jennings or a Malik Scott would cause problems for Joyce. Clearly, Joyce is very fit, very strong. He's probably going to have a lot of power. So, we'll see how he gets on. We'll see how he gets on. He may, and I suspect he actually will, find that his style is more suited to the pro ranks than the amateur ranks. But look, I don't think, as I've already said in this live stream, look at what happened when Lomachenko fought for a world title, early on in his career. And Joe Joyce is nowhere near the amateur of Lomachenko. Joe Joyce has nowhere near the technique of a guy like Lomachenko. So for me, interesting prospect. I think there's a risk he could be a Chisora or a Dillian Whyte or a Jarrell Miller. I think he could be that kind of fighter rather than a world title level fighter. But let's see. Certainly not off the 5 fights. And even if they would throw him into the Wolves, there's no way Joshua's going to fight him after 5 fights, in my humble opinion. Glenn, I think Tyson Fury is going to Matchroom and him and Dillian Whyte will fight. because he still has the Ring Magazine belt. Why? I don't know, but the winner will fight Joshua, in my opinion. What do you think of that? I am not confident we will ever see Tyson Fury fight again. So I don't think it will happen. I would not really suspect that he would. I don't really think that he will go with Matchroom. I don't really think he'll fight Dillian Whyte. I just, for me, realistic course of events, but we'll see. Perhaps you'll be right, Glenn. Daniel, so to Daniel, if Eddie Hearn set Dave Allen up with a proper trainer and got his mind focused, what could he achieve? I see Dave Allen as a charismatic young heavyweight with a lot of skill and a granite chin, but he isn't helping himself. Maybe reaction and proper training could propel him to better things. I personally think a fully fit Dave Allen beats David Price. Your thoughts? Look, I like David Allen. I do like David Allen. Long-time viewers will know I've had David Allen on the channel 3 or 4 times now. I've spoken to him a few times. Really nice guy, charismatic, likable heavyweight with some real talent in there. He's durable as hell. He's one of these fighters. I think perhaps Irish Tom might have said this on the podcast. He's sparred a lot of quality rounds against quality opponents. Klitschko, Spilka, Joshua. He's had good sparring, and he actually looks very slick and very technically capable defensively, Dave Allen. He really does. And I think that's a product of him going through that sparring and, being used to surviving rounds against guys of that quality. And is slightly weaker is his offense. If you look at a fight where Dave Allen is expected to win, where he's got to lead with a jab, where he's got to push the pace, I don't think he's anywhere near as technically refined offensively as he is defensively. Offensively, his jab is relatively average. He often smothers his work. He gets too close. He doesn't judge the range too well, and sometimes it's a bit slappy. And I think you look at the way he fought against Luis Ortiz, and you think, wow, this is a fighter who could go somewhere under different circumstances. But then you look at him against Linares Thomas, and you kind of think, actually, the offense just isn't there. And I wonder, Dave Allen's still young. He's getting some fantastic experience under his belt. He can come again. I don't know. I don't know if he's got the capability to, I hope he has, but I don't know if he's got the capability to be a world level fighter, a European level fighter. The British title scene is going to be increasingly hot in a year or two. If Dave Allen fought today for a British title, I'd probably pick him over Sexton and Gary Cornice. I don't know if I'd pick him over Ian Lewison. I think Ian Lewison's style, the slickness, the long-range game, could actually beat Dave Allen. But the problem Dave Allen's got is when he rebuilds in a year or two, you're going to have guys like Daniel Dubois, Nathan Gorman, those sort of guys fighting for British titles. And those guys look like quality prospects. Those guys look like guys who will go to European level at least, potentially even higher. So I don't know. I don't know. It's an interesting one. I hope Dave Allen comes again. Could he beat David Price? Absolutely, he could beat David Price. David Price is his own worst enemy. If Allen survived the first 3 or 4 rounds against David Price and then put him under pressure, Dave Price probably gasses. Dave Price probably falls to pieces, and he could easily get absolutely chinned. So yeah, that's my perspective. Could he beat David Price? Yes. But let's be honest, quite a lot of us would pick quite a lot of different heavyweights to beat David Price right now. Jay has put, what weighs more, a ton of bricks, a ton of feathers, or Jarrell Miller out of shape? I love it. Jay has also put, what chance would you give Bellew against Ward? Probably a 10% chance. It depends what weight it's at. Look, if it's at heavyweight, and Bellew comes in at, I don't know, 215, 220. He's got a huge size advantage. If it's at cruiserweight, then I think the gap in weight and size is going to be slightly narrower, and I think Ward has a real technical advantage. So I think at cruiserweight, I'd give him a 10% chance. At heavyweight, maybe I'd give him like 15 to 20% chance. Bellew, for me, clearly he carries power. He's not a ridiculous puncher, and Ward is very adept defensively. I think Ward would potentially outbox him from range. Bellew's always been a bit susceptible to getting caught with a jab. I think on the inside, Ward would be next level. But you know what I've said, guys? I've written Tony Bellew off more than any fighter on this channel. And he's proved me wrong many, many, many times. I've lost a lot of money betting against Tony Bellew. So maybe he'll keep winning. And if maybe he'll beat Andre Ward. Let's see. Dan, ever thought of holidaying down in New Zealand? You've got a big following here and it'd be awesome. There's a heap load of up-and-coming talent in our little country. Dan, I'd love to. Life gets in the way. There's obviously work, family, financial commitments. Not going to be possible anytime soon, but you never know. I'd certainly love to go if the chance develops. And you know, I've had a few Kiwis who tune into the channel offer to take me out for a beer if I ever go out there. So it would certainly be fun. Daniel, how far can Sam Eggington go? He's seemingly overachieving. I would like to see a Bradley Skeet rematch. He also asked, how far can Bradley Skeet go? Good question. Sam Eggington's another guy who kind of falls into the Tony Bellew category of someone I've written off time and time and time again. And he's constantly overperformed. And he also falls into the Tony Bellew category that I've lost a load of money on him. I think I bet on Paulie Malignaggi to beat him. I think I definitely bet on Frankie Gavin to beat him. And I was really surprised that Sam Eggington, you know, won those fights. I guess the difference between Eggington and Bellew is Eggington's much, much, much younger. Eggington still has scope to improve, and he's shown that improvement. As for Bradley Skeet, you know, I'd pick Bradley Skeet to beat Eggington again. I think Eggington's technical deficiencies were exposed by a fighter as accomplished as Bradley Skeet. And I don't think he'll have ironed them out to the extent to get the job done against Bradley Skeet, despite the fact he's gained some good experience and despite the fact he's undoubtedly improved. I think Sam Eggington can be involved in some good fights. I don't view him as an elite talent. The welterweight scene is quite deep. Could he beat a guy like Sean Porter? You know, I mean, could he beat a guy like Keith Thurman, Errol Spence? Hell no. If we go down a level, the Sean Porters, the Bertos, you know, the Amir Khans, could he beat those sort of guys? I still think it's unlikely. I still think his, you know, some of his technical deficiencies get exposed at that sort of level. As for Bradley Skeet, I think Bradley Skeet beats Jeff Hearn. Let me tell you that. Could he win a world title? Very, very possibly. It's hard, though. With Bradley Skeet, he hasn't really... It's weird. I know he beat Sam Eggington, but I don't feel like Bradley Skeet's had the fights yet. I don't feel like Bradley Skeet's been tested, you know, above that sort of Eggington and Gavin level. And I think how he'll react at that sort of level will be key to determining his potential. But I've been saying it for years now. Bradley Skeet needs a push. He needs to fight someone at a fringe level. And then, you know, we'll see. Frank Warren, I'm not convinced about the job he's done with Bradley Skeet, but hopefully the opportunity will come, and hopefully Bradley Skeet will deliver when it does come. Luke, is David Price going to get KO'd by Zumbano Love? I don't think so. I don't think so. It's a possibility, because it's a possibility David Price could get KO'd by a gust of wind. But Zumbano Love, he's very much an opponent, and David Price should still be operating at a level that means he's capable of beating a Zumbano Love. I would hope so anyway. John Joe. So that's John Joe, long-time viewer. Would you consider stopping making boxing videos if Mayweather loses, Vijender Singh becomes a world champ, and Bellew becomes heavyweight champ? I would give up on the sport. I think my credibility would be so low. I'd have to, John Joe, whether I'd want to or not. Don't know if I could come back from that, mate. Lee Plant, how do you see a Bellew Hay rematch going if it's made and Hay trains properly and is 100% fit? The big question is if Hay is 100% fit. Hay's an old guy now with severe injuries, and his style isn't going to age well. You know, he's an explosive speedster, athletic power puncher. He's not someone who's going to be like Bernard Hopkins into his 50s, who relies on technique and angles and defense. Look, if David Hay turned up 100%, I think he'd do Tony Bellew in 30 seconds. But will David Hay ever be 100%? I think that's extremely unlikely. So what we'd likely see is a 70% David Hay against a peak Bellew, and that could go either way. But look, for me, again, I've written Bellew off so many times, but a peak David Hay is an elite fighter. A peak Tony Bellew, for me, is not an elite fighter. Chris, do you think Eubank Jr. wins the super middleweight tournament? Again, I'm going to caveat this by saying I've said on the channel before, I'm not sure Eubank Jr. completes the super middleweight tournament. The Eubanks are known for bizarre demands. The Eubanks are known for strange negotiation techniques. Don't be surprised if Eubank wins the first round and then he says, oh, the next round's against George Groves, we want more money for that fight. You know, or we want to choose the commentators. Or, you know, the Eubanks are very difficult to deal with. If they don't like the way things are going, well, we saw what happened recently. Frank Warren, as I understand it, won a substantial judgment for them pulling out of the Tommy Langford fight. That they're slippery, difficult operators to deal with. So I'm not convinced they complete the tournament. I don't know if they will submit to the control that the tournament enforces on you, with your next 3 fights being tied up, with the time frames being tied up, with the financials and broadcasters being tied up. We'll see. I think he could easily win the tournament, yeah. I know Dubois is picking him to get beaten in round 1. I haven't seen much of his opponent, so perhaps I need to check that out a bit more. But I think Eubank, as much as I like George Groves, and I've always picked Groves in that fight, I'm starting to think Eubank and his style may be enough to beat George Groves, and I certainly think it's enough to beat Callum Smith. So if he completes that tournament, I definitely think he could win. I think the Groves fight is a real 50-50 matchup. As for Callum Smith fight, that's definitely a Eubank, one I'd be on Eubank's side for. I still think Eubank's vulnerable to a real super middleweight, a big super middleweight like George Groves, who can jab and move. I still think he'd eat a lot of punches from the outside. I still think he's very wide and defensively frail and sloppy. But he's improved a lot, and the pressure, the educated pressure that he can bring would really cause someone like George Groves to struggle. George Groves not so comfortable on the inside, not so comfortable when he can't dictate the pace. Chris talks about his top 5 heavyweights of all time. I'm sure you've seen last week's podcast, mate, but I'm not going to go back over that because we covered it in extensive detail in that, including my list. Lewis, are you in favour of more tournaments like the super middleweights? Do you miss prize fighter? Absolutely. Let's see it. Let's hope this tournament's a success. Let's hope there aren't pullouts. Let's hope there aren't injuries. Let's hope it sticks to the schedule. And it's great for boxing. Big fights being made, more competition, big name fighters being attracted. Really, really like it. Let's hope it continues. I do miss prize fighter. I thought prize fighter was entertaining. You know, it probably did go on for a bit too long, but now we've had a break for it. I'd certainly like it back. Yeah. Woody, in an ideal world, what fights are you hoping to get made in 2018 the most? Well, less heavyweight unification, certainly. Joshua Wilder, Joshua versus the Parker Fury winner. Those would be, you know, superb matchups. Let's have a think. the winner of the super middleweight 8 tournament against James DeGale. That'd be good. Furman versus Errol Spence. That'd be pretty fantastic. Selby Frampton, I'd love to see. Linares, Mikey Garcia, I'd love to see. I'd like to see Crawford step up to 147 and take on the top guys there. Huge amount going on. Brett, a history of the governing bodies and who has the best regs. To be honest, I don't know. I don't know the history of the governing bodies. It's not something I've ever looked into, and I'm not too clear on the regs, so I'm going to have to take the fifth on that one, I'm afraid. Daniel has said, Daniel Dubois, would he be better off staying at Frank or flourish on another promotional platform such as Matchroom? Plus, how far can he go? Given his age and potential, what rate can he be moved? I wouldn't move from Frank. Frank's doing a fantastic job with him right now. He's fighting for the Southern Area title in his next fight, and he's being built quite nicely. I'd like to see him fight very durable journeymen. Kevin Johnson, Dennis Baktov, you know, guys who are going to give him rounds. I think that's the key for Daniel Dubois. We know he's got power. We know he's going to get to a certain level. Let's see him fight guys who are going to give him rounds. That's where he's going to be tested. That's where he's going to be learned. You know, he's not going to get beaten because a durable journeyman's going to give him 5 rounds. Nor should he at this stage of his career. But that sort of in-ring experience would be invaluable. How far can he go? Really, I'd just be picking anything out of his any guess. We haven't really seen anything of Daniel Dubois yet. We know Dubois carries a lot of power. We know he does. Have we seen anything from him in terms of technique, etc.? Not really. All his fights have been over too quickly. He's been far too dominant. So it's maybe when we see him against someone for 5 or 6 rounds, we'll be able to make a determination as to what level he can be at. But yeah, certainly I'd like to see him beat AJ Carter for the Southern Area. I'd like to see him fight 3 or 4 6-rounders against really durable journeymen, and then maybe next year take an English or a British title fight. Daniel asks if Devin Haney can become an elite fighter. He's someone I need to check out more. He's someone I haven't seen too much of, but I hear good things. Timmy has asked, what are your thoughts overall on the Super Series? As I've said already on the stream, very, very pro on it. Who have you got winning? Who should broadcast their fights in the UK? As I say, I think Eubank, if he stays in, could be my pick for the super middleweight. I think it's hard to look past Usyk in the cruiserweights, although I'd give a shout out to Mike Perez. I think he can upset people. I'm going to probably pick Mike Perez over Bradis in the first round, which is a bit of a shout. Who should broadcast their fights? Well, it'd be fantastic if it was on terrestrial TV. I suspect it's going to be with multiple broadcasters, despite the fact that Eddie Hearn has said previously they were looking to the Super Series were only looking to give you their fights if you took all of them. I suspect that won't happen. I suspect there's too much money in splitting it up. So if that's true, you heard it here first. Right. Still rattling through these questions. I think I've got 4 or 5 more, and then we'll go to the chat for 10 minutes. So I'll make these ones quite quick. Daniel. Evening, Daniel. Do you think Warren's young crop Yard Dubois can be as successful as Matchrooms? Not just in ring, but as far as exposure and platform. Can they be as successful in ring? Yes. Frank's got some superb talent. Can they be as successful outside? I don't believe so. I don't believe the Box Nation BT Sports platform is comparable to Sky right now. And I think in terms of public perception and public platform, you need... in this day and age, you need that kind of backing to get maximum visibility. Simon has put, do you think it's the easy thing for a lot of so-called hardcore fans on YouTube hammer Eddie Hearn and his fighters. Yeah, I think a lot of it's trying to be, you know, I used the phrase boxing hipster. You know, it's unfashionable to like Eddie Hearn. It's unfashionable to buy pay-per-views. You know, it seems to be the cool boxing thing to do to, you know, to be a fan of the lesser-known fighters and to be fans of the flyweights, etc. So I do think it's the easy thing to do. I think a lot of the Eddie Hearn haters neglect some of the positives that he's done for the sport. And people are, you know, I have this debate with Irish Tom regularly on the podcast. Guys like Irish Tom, very, very quick to say, look at the sport when Ben and Eubank were fighting. And that's a valid point. But I also think we should look at the sport immediately prior to Eddie Hearn when, you know, we had guys like Danny Williams and Audley Harrison. And yeah, Eddie Hearn has, for me, provided a vast, vast improvement on that era, if you like. A vast, vast improvement. And the Ben Eubank thing, yeah, it's a fair point, but for me, it's not a comparable era, if you like. Jonathan, what do you think to Campbell's chances against Linares? Personally, I think the style, he's got a style to beat him, but it could be a couple of fights too early. I think Linares will knock out Campbell, I'm afraid. I really do. I think Linares is an elite fighter. I think Campbell's very good. I've always been a fan of Luke Campbell. But I question his punch resistance. I question his durability. And I think he seems to struggle and, you know, go back into his cell a bit as he steps up in levels. And Linares is a very, very high level. So for me, I'm afraid I think Linares is going to find gaps in his game and probably stop him. Linares is a seriously elite fighter. He's someone I should have thrown into the earlier question about an underrated world level fighter. For me, Jorge Linares. Right, guys, I need to be off by 9 o'clock precisely. So I have about 10 minutes spare. We'll go into the chat. If you want to ask a question, put the hashtag BG and I will read out your question. If you don't put hashtag BG, I won't read it out. So if you want it read out, put out hashtag BG. I've only got about 10 minutes left. And we will rattle through as many as we can. Let me just have a sip of the Westerns. I'm not getting through this, too strong for me. TMT, BG, do you agree with Hatman that Huey might have mental weakness at the highest level? He might do, in the same sense that any fighter might do, but I've not seen anything to suspect that will be the case. Mikey said prediction for Ndongo Crawford. Mikey, I know you're picking Ndongo. I'm Team Crawford for this one. I think Crawford is a super elite fighter, and Ndongo looks very, very good, but I'm not sure he's got it at that sort of level. M-Star, BG, do you think Clev has been thrown under the bus? As if he loses against Jack, where does he go? I would say I don't think he's been thrown under the bus. I think this was an intentional direction for Cleverly. I get the impression Nathan Cleverly didn't want to come back and have 3 or 4 routine defenses against unheard of guys, and, you know, that sort of thing. I think Cleverly isn't the sort of guy who wants to be fighting 3 or 4 times a year and is inclined to have bigger fights for bigger paydays. So do I think he's been thrown under the bus? No, I think it's a conscious decision. Do I think it's the best matchmaking and the best management for his career? Probably not. But if the fighter wants to go a certain way, then he does. Stuart is asking about Bruce Forsyth's death. Shout out to Bruce Forsyth. White Rhino, how far do you see Joe Joyce going? I think we need to see him in the pro ranks. You know, based on his amateur performances, I have some cause for concern that he may not make it to the top level, but I think it's too early just yet. Let's have a look. Oh, wow. Swan says Cotto versus Kamagai. Cotto, surely. DJ Slicks, BG, who's your fighter of the year so far? Good question. I'd consider Andre Ward. I think the Crawford and Dongo winner would have a very high chance, and I think that would be the most likely favourite, the Crawford and Dongo winner. Possibly the Triple G Canelo winner, you'd have to throw in there as well. Anthony Joshua, you'd have to throw in as well. You know, lots of names. Darren, BG, who outworks Eubank Jr. at middle super middleweight if they can't stop him? I don't think anyone necessarily outworks him. I think certain fighters would make him look very, very inaccurate and be able to catch him. Guys like James DeGale, for example. I think James DeGale would be hard for Eubank to hit. I think Andre Durrell would be hard for Eubank to hit. And I'm not saying they'd have the output of him, but I think they could beat him. Martin C. BG, Parker Fury ticket sales do well, yeah or no? Neither guy has the biggest profile in the UK, so I don't think they're going to do as well as like Anthony Joshua tickets, for example. But I'm sure it's a very good fight. They're very good fighters, so I'm sure they will do well at a certain level, you know. But I don't think it's going to be like a smash sellout in 20 minutes type thing like we've seen with some of the matchroom builds. BDB, BG, as he's back on Saturday, where would you rank Bryant Jennings, considering he's not won in 3 years despite a good resume? Well, assuming he comes back and gets active, I think he's on the periphery of the top 10. You know, somewhere between 8 and 12. Mr. Boxing Today, shout out to Mr. Boxing Today too. Great channel, great heavyweight content. Anyone who wants a good YouTube channel, check him out, Mr. Boxing Today too. He says, keep up the good work, bro. Appreciate your content. And vice versa. Always checking on your channel. So thanks for that. Mikey, BG, who would you back in your 5 versus Gonzalez? I'd consider your fight, actually. I may even pick your fight. Mr. Howard says, hello, gossip, Mayweather within 6. Bart says, Tom, will the winner of the cruiserweight tournament move to heavyweight once they unify by fighting Lebedev, of course? Well, I think if Mike Perez or Alexander Usyk won, who, in my opinion, are my 2 favourites to win, probably, yeah. I think that would clean out the cruiserweight division. And I think both of those guys are more than capable of fighting at heavyweight. Perez already has. Usyk's talked about it. And that's, of course, where the money is. So I think very possibly. Also, thoughts on Lucas Brown in the WBC rankings. I don't really understand how he's ranked. I know he had a comeback fight, but I thought he was banned. I think I saw a tweet from Ricky Hatton suggesting he was banned, but maybe times have changed. And as far as I understand it, his comeback opponent wasn't much cop, but there you go. Rob Elliott, BG, McGregor can only win if it's an early finish, unless like a Malignaggi, an old Mayweather tires in the last couple of rounds. DJ 6BG, what's your views on Bellew wanting to fight Bisping? Well, look, Bellew, it's a money grab, isn't it? Bellew doesn't want to go and fight Usyk or Bradis or Perez. He's not necessarily interested in fighting the best competition in his weight class. He's looking for the big publicity fights, and you know, I guess he's on the riding the quest of the wave of the Mayweather McGregor fight and hoping for some of that as well. I can see a load of comments through in the chat. I've got to be off at 9, so I'll rattle through as many as I can. Jared, BG, Triple G or Canelo? Very, very, very hard, slightly to Canelo. The Wizard, BG, winner of Smith versus Williams rematch. Liam Smith by a whisker. Simon Peters, BG, what fighters do you like personally? I've met Paul Smith, Anthony Crolla, Luke Campbell, all really, really nice guys. Dave Allen, I've spoken to loads. You know, real nice guy. I've spoken to Charles Martin a few times. Nice guy. I've spoken to Jeff Horn once. Yeah, a lot of nice people in boxing, definitely. BG, if we see the old Ortiz versus Joshua, who do you think wins? Joshua at this stage. I answered Ortiz versus Wilder earlier. It'd be the same reasoning. Mikey, BG, pick 3 unlikely future world champions. I don't think Tyrone Nurse is going to be one, I'm afraid, Mikey. 3 unlikely world champions. Bradley Skeet, Leon Woodstock, Nathan Gorman. M-Star, BG, with no news on Brook, do you think he has limited options right now? 147 is dead. 154, there's too many killers. Absolutely. He's in the autumn of his career. He's had some tough fights. Don't be surprised if we see him take 1 or 2 cash-out fights at this stage. You know, whether he's got the desire to rebuild and go on another world title run where he's not necessarily getting huge money and being on pay-per-view and being the home fighter, it's going to be hard. Stuart, BG, do you think DeGale beats Eubank? I do, in a very close fight. I think DeGale would make Eubank miss a lot. I think DeGale has capability to close fighters down and fight with them on the inside. And I think DeGale is substantially technically better than Eubank. Team Groves, BG, will you ever upload you boxing? So do a boxing training series? Don't think so. Don't think I'm anywhere near good enough, Team Groves. Archie asked what I'm drinking. Watch it back, Archie, from the start, but it's Henry Weston's cider. TMT, guys, if you're still watching, stop asking questions because I don't want to not answer yours and I need to shoot off in 2 or 3 minutes. TMT, do you see that Warren and BT are not behind Parker versus Huey, but it's Hennessy? Yeah, I did see that. I've heard it's on ITV box office. I don't know what the reason is. It sounds like Hennessy is still the lead promoter there, so I guess he holds the cards. But there you go. Sports says BG, will we see an undisputed heavyweight champ next year? No, don't think the fights will get made. DJ Slicks, BG, do you believe Yard ducked Hosea Burton? And would you have had him as favourite? Do you believe he beats Buglioni? I think Yard beats both Buglioni and Burton. I do think he ducks Burton. I would have had him as a substantial favourite, 1-4, 1-5 on. I don't think they wanted to take the risk of the awkward long-range style from Burton. Burton's 6'4", 6'5". Yard is very, very short at the weight. I don't think they like that dynamic. The fight was ordered. There was a huge amount of money on the table. He ducked him, yes. Adam Fahy, BG, your thoughts on super heavyweight card in future? Bring all the champs together. Parker versus Huey. Said he would like to fight Bellew. Yeah, it would be fantastic. I don't think it's likely for. I don't think it's likely that we'd see it on one card because I think the amount of money needed to get all the guys together would be far too much. So I think it's unlikely, but we'd always love for that sort of stuff to happen. Guys, I'm out. Thanks to everyone who's been watching live. Sport, thank you. Simon, thank you. Team Groves, thank you. Jared, thank you. Cheers to all the guys. Been fun. My voice is killing me. I don't think I'm going to finish the Henry Westons, but there you go. I've been chatting too much and not drinking enough. Please hit the thumbs up button. Please press subscribe if you haven't done so already. This will be uploaded to the channel in 20, 30 minutes or so. I'm out. Have a good weekend, guys. Thanks for choosing to watch this. Cheers.